Hey guys, welcome back to After Hours. Today we've got Laura Starky, which is her handle is at iamlaura.starky, Starky on Instagram. I'll put that in the show notes at the end. Yeah, an amazing conversation with Laura. She was kind of from a similar era, a little bit older than me, but 80s and 90s, kind of growing up. Where alcohol was kind of, just with everything in society. Then around kind of early to mid 90s, she found the kind of rave music dance scene. That kind of psychedelic era of finding, those kind of party drugs, I guess you want to call them. A normal kind of life, just kind of living day to day, and enjoying different aspects of life. And alcohol just kind of took a hold of her, and it just got worse and worse and worse. Laura, I would say, was kind of borderline between. She's not even the grey area drinker. She was dependent on it. She went through withdrawal. And but from the outset, looking at her life, you wouldn't really think she was, a full raging, for want of a better word, alcoholic. But it doesn't discriminate, and it just kind of can affect everyone. I took a lot from the conversation with Laura, so I hope you guys do too. I have been moving house. So, I'm kind of, I'm just recording this on the Friday. I moved on Monday in with my fiance and her kids. Life is good. I've just been trying to set up the studio, as we're calling it, so I can do my podcasts up here. So I've got a couple coming up in the next few weeks. So it won't be in the dry arms of the cottage, but it will be in the studio, as we're calling, kind of Jen's craft room stroke podcast studio. So, it has been a bit of a hectic, mad week, but we're all just kind of settling into new life, and the cats are currently locked in. We'll let them out, I think, this weekend. So yeah, stay tuned for more updates on my life. Obviously the podcast is about other people, but I want to obviously give updates on what's going on in my life as well. I listen to the Adam Buxton podcast a lot. He's one of my favorite podcasters, although it's a completely different kind of vibe from what I'm doing. I do like the whole kind of chatty, kind of conversational podcast that he has, and I want that with mine. But also, he tells you about his life as well. So I hope that's not been too boring for you. Anyway, let's get on with Laura now. Cheers, guys. Hi, Laura. Welcome to After Hours. How are you today?
Fabulous. Thanks for having me, Jimmy. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you this evening.
Yeah, good. Thanks. I mean, we've had a few kind of blips and mishaps getting you on the podcast. Mostly my fault. Well, all my fault with my computer and stuff. So thank you so much for your patience, and I'm glad we finally get to kind of meet up and have a chat. So,
Yeah, me too.
you're in the northeast, did you say? Just up by
East Yorkshire.
East Yorkshire, sorry.
Yeah, in the UK. Yeah,
UK.
just outside Hull.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I know it well. As I say, I used to live in Willerby up there as well. How's the weather been today? Because we've had amazing weather, but the last 2 days have just been a bit wet and miserable.
It's just gone wet today. Yeah, although it's turning out quite a nice evening. Yeah.
I saw a post. I saw a post today, and it was like R.I.P. the Scottish summer, and it was like 2nd of April to the 15th of April. So
Yeah.
yeah.
We have been spoiled, haven't we, these last few days?
Oh, I know. I
We have
just
been
hope that's
spoiled.
not the end of it, and we do get a good summer. So yeah.
Yeah. Fingers
So
crossed.
let's just tell us a little bit about your kind of childhood, where you grew up, and when you had your first drink. Then, Laura.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the coast, the Holderness area, so that's east of Hull, I suppose. Yeah, in a seaside town. and my first drink would have been ooh, round about the 14,
Yeah.
15 age. I think it's quite a common era. I was born 1970, so we're talking about the mid 80s, mid to late 80s.
Hmm.
So there was that kind of, well, there still isn't there, but very much a culture, wasn't there, around the
Yeah.
pub, for sure. And I've thought a lot about my history and my childhood over the last couple of years,
Hmm.
and there was a lot around wanting to fit in
Mm.
and having a lot of anxiety and not feeling that I did fit in. And alcohol was a great leveler, to do that. And I was also very tomboyish, so I used to hang about with a lot of lads
Mm.
and drink pint for pint. I remember my first time my mother ever saw me holding a pint, a glass. She was mortified, but that was that ladette culture. That you know women can drink men pint for pint, and I
Yeah.
probably could drink a lot of them under the table and did.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot to be answered for that, because women were like in kind of late 80s, early 90s, and mid 90s drinking lads pint for pint. And then I think, well, it's obviously going to have a more detrimental effect if you're, slighter, smaller than the lads as well. So it's quite a dangerous kind of precedent for people to be, well, we can drink pint for pint and all that. And it became like, if you saw someone like a lady in a pub with a half pint, you were kind of like, oh, look at, do you know what I mean? It was kind of like you were expected to be drinking pints, and that's
Yeah.
just a kind of sad state of affairs that we were in.
I think I remember my saying was, "Why go to the bar twice when you can only go once for a pint?"
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, yeah. Just thinking back to those times. I mean, yeah, the pub was in a seaside town. We were in there lunch times, probably 4 or 5 nights, a week,
Hmm.
lunchtime over the weekends as well, for sure. But
And so would that have been in your 20s? What were you
oh
drinking?
no, no,
No,
this
this was
was
this was
underage drinking,
right,
Jimmy.
right, yeah, yeah.
Underage drinking.
Yeah,
You
because it
didn't,
was a different time, wasn't it? You didn't
yeah,
need ID or anything
completely.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I was going to say about my drinking pint for pint is you can't tell because I'm sitting down, but I am only 5'3" and a peanut.
Right.
I've always been on the shorter side.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, I mean, it was a different time. Nobody asked to see your driving license or
Yeah.
whatever. You just slid into a dark corner, and one of the older ones would, go to the bar,
Go to the bar.
and that was that. And in fact, I do have a recollection, quite sad, really, of buying Special Brew
Oh,
cans. Do you remember Special Brew?
I do, yeah. What's that? Tenant special brew? Yeah,
Tennant
good old
Special
Scottish
Brew.
special brew. What's it, about eight,
Yeah,
9% or
it was
something?
9%, if I
Nine.
remember rightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went through a period of, buying Special Brew, taking that to school,
Hmm.
but then, yeah, spending times in toilets, twagging school. It was, and of course there was the tobacco, the fags that went with it as well.
Yeah. So you were a smoker as well then, yeah.
Beer and
Yeah.
fags,
Beer
yeah.
and fags. I mean, someone told me years ago, or I read it somewhere, that so the alcohol thins your blood, and the tobacco, smoking it, clots your blood, so they go hand in hand. And thinking back, it's like, well, no, that's not good. It's something that's doing that, having that effect on your blood is
Yeah.
absolutely insane. A friend of mine, I was living in London, and I lived in this little, it was off the street, so you had to go through like a door, keypad door, and then there was loads of apartments around there. It was in East End, and he came to he came round to visit, and I was just coming home from work, and he kind of phoned. He said, "Oh, are you home yet?" I said, "I'll be about half an hour." He said, "Right, okay." He said, "What's your keypad?" So I let him in, and we had these lovely guys that lived next door to us, and they must have come home to work and seen him sitting outside my apartment. And when I got home, he had a crate of special brew and 2 bottles of Buckfast. And I was like, dude, what? I don't drink what? He goes, well, if you've got a Scottish mate, like, why can't you go and buy all this, the Scottish bevies? And I thought, so we had a couple of these special brews, and honestly, we were flying. We had a crazy mad night, but
Yeah.
it wasn't. The special brew wasn't something that, or Buckfast wasn't something that I,
Mm.
particularly
Mm.
partook in.
And what I do remember was that you certainly weren't drinking those for the taste. There
No.
was none of that connoisseur coming in, which that comes later, doesn't it? Further down the line, when you think you're being a bit of a connoisseur
Yeah.
with your wines and your gins and things, but
Yeah.
it tasted disgusting
Of course it
and
did. It was only doing a job, and the job was to get you completely sauced.
hammered.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so how
completely.
were you measuring up? You said you're a bit on the short side. How were you measuring up with drinking all those pints? Did you could you handle your booze
I,
or
I was first. I was first to the bar,
yeah,
first to finish the first, drinks. I drank fast,
yeah.
and then and I was always the last to go home. Everybody would be, peeling off for the evening, and I'd be like, well, I'm still. Somebody once called me a Duracell battery.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
just that
Duracell buddy. Yeah.
bunny. Yeah, it just keep going. Yeah, there was just no off switch. Like I think that's the case for many of us that have a difficult relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, because I think if you've got a relationship with it where right, I've had enough, I'm gonna go home now. Whereas
Yeah,
with me, it was just like, no, I would just drink until I'd literally pass out, or the money ran out, or it
yeah.
was time to get home, or whatever. But I would have just kind of carried on regardless. So when did you? I mean, how was your school, and did you go to uni
Yeah.
or work or
No,
that?
gosh, no, no. YTS.
YTS, nice. Yeah,
The
yeah. Was that the youth training or young
youth training
youth training
scheme.
scheme? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We
yeah.
did that in
I
Scotland.
left school. I left school with no qualifications and very much, you know, being written off by teachers at that point.
Yeah.
And I twagged probably the best part of my last couple of years of school. Just really
And
struggled
that was,
to fit
sorry, was
in.
that to do with kind of the drinking? Was that aspect
No,
kind of,
no. I
or
think
just,
it was, it was just more around, you know, I mean, I'm going to go into all of that detail, but
no, sure.
difficult childhood, and I'd experienced quite a number of years of abuse, and I think it was that I don't know. I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
I didn't particularly have an identity. I was very much fluid. Whoever I was with, I would kind of morph myself to be like those people. I think my number one aim back then was to just fit in really and
Yeah.
be liked, for sure.
But it
So
also sounds a little bit like you were kind of going to these different people and groups, and that maybe as a form of escapism to get away from what was going on at home, or externally from
yeah,
from your friends. Yeah.
yeah. And there was a I had a stepdad for a few years, and he was an alcoholic.
Right.
And I remember distinctly the thinking,
Hmm.
because I saw him go, being sectioned twice, being taken off to dry out, for his detoxes, and I remember thinking, I've got to respect. I need to respect alcohol because
Hmm.
I could see the end result. Do you know what I mean? I could see the trajectory. And I remember thinking that'll never happen to me. I'll never let alcohol take me that way.
Yeah.
And I think in those early years, I didn't believe I was being taken that way because in the culture,
Hmm.
I wasn't doing anything that wasn't particularly different from the people around me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Or on TV, it was
yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
This was what people did. We
yeah,
it was all the good time, wasn't it? So if you were partying, you had alcohol.
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that because you're still getting up and going to work and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there were times when I, blacked out and woke up in strange places.
Mm.
Italian gardens in Withensea for one, not knowing how I'd got in the rose bushes, but I'd probably slept there all night. It's like, and thankfully nothing terribly, I mean, it was terrible, but
Yeah,
that
but
minimization of like, at least I didn't, at least I wasn't,
yeah,
there
yeah,
was
but it
always
is scary thinking back
yeah,
to, the things that, I could have got myself involved in or,
mm,
just, yeah, even, even being a man myself, obviously it's a lot more dangerous for women. And but whenever you're like that, you're so vulnerable and anyone could be taking
mm,
advantage of you. But as I say,
mm,
touch wood, I was, I always managed to get home, or if, like yourself, I fell asleep in parks and that, I was never
yeah.
picked up by the police or by, randoms.
Or
So
jumped by a group of,
yeah,
because that's the thing for men. It's a different type of risk, isn't it? It's
yeah,
it's often the violence, isn't it, on the street?
yeah.
But yeah, but somehow, yeah, I managed to make it through. But I want to say that I always had a really good work ethic,
Hmm.
even though I, you know, I say in quotes, failed school, and certainly, my work with children and young people going forward, would always be keen to share that just because you don't get your exams doesn't mean you're a failure
Oh
in
no,
life.
absolutely not. Yeah,
Often you're often led to, it can feel like that, and I think even more so today, children and young people have so much pressure on them, don't they, to perform, for sure. But yeah, but I always had a really good work ethic, and I joke about the youth training scheme, but I was all over that, and
hmm
that was for me. There was never going to be any doubt that I wouldn't do anything but work, and I. Worked extremely hard and wasn't on the YTS for that long actually,
mm.
but then got a good job, and then went on to several careers, but I think maybe that's one of the things that I've since learned since getting sober is the way I did alcohol is the way I do everything in life.
Yeah, full extreme. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, totally, and that's one of the things I suppose that I've had to come to work with, and I can see
Apologies.
Poppy the cat's popped in to say hello.
It was a
um,
birthday yesterday. What you did? What do you want? I'm busy at the moment. I think she's just coming to see who's on the screen.
who's talking?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Right, let's get you
oh,
down.
she's beautiful.
We'll just put her up there like a parrot for a minute.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So what were the kind of different kind of jobs that you were doing then? This was through your kind of late teens, 20s, I'm guessing. Yeah.
yeah. So I'd always, well, for a good few years, I felt that I thought I wanted to be, a paramedic,
Okay.
ambulance service. I loved the program Casualty.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, and I did do that. In them days, you had to be 21, to start.
Yeah.
That was the entry criteria. So I bided my time in dentistry, until I turned 21, and started work for what was then Humberside Ambulance Service,
Hmm.
and yeah, that's where I met my husband.
Hmm.
But from there, I then went full circle, because actually that journey taught me that I wasn't thick,
Yeah,
because
well, yeah, of course. I mean, this is
I'd
the
had
thing. The whole thing with, if you fail school, don't go to university. There's such a huge kind of like, oh well, the teachers are telling you that, yeah, your life's ruined if you don't do well at school, and that's absolute BS because
mm,
so many different jobs and careers, they can be done like on kind of job training and things like that. So just because you've not gone to university, like I didn't go to university until I was in my 30s, and even then
mm,
I didn't pass it, but it was one of those things that was kind of like you were looked down upon, and it's horrible. And as you say, it's
Mm.
even worse now. You're
It's
not.
worse now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, for sure. So yeah, realised that I wasn't a numpty,
yeah.
and did the ambulance work for was that 6 years I was in. But at that time, I think it's probably worth to say that that was probably my first breakthrough.
Hmm.
And I had my and I did call it a rebirth then, but it was a spiritual awakening from that experience. It completely shifted my paradigm on life. It was like a whole veil was revealed on life, and then decided that okay, I'd like to go to university now, and um, did social work. It's like,
Right, right.
yeah, but yeah, I think that was a that was a it was a good time. I mean, being at university was the
Hmm.
best
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
Not so much around. I don't think in terms of the. I think at that times of like reinventing myself, I'd just been through this bit of a
Hmm.
breakdown, breakthrough,
Breakdown, breakthrough.
and I
Yeah.
was almost like creating that new identity. It
Hmm.
was like a bit of a death rebirth, and I was doing that in the university setting, and so it was an exciting time. It's almost like I reevaluated who I was, what my
Yeah.
values were, and then went off like this crusade into child protection work.
Mm.
um, that feeling that I had a lot to give. I'd because my experiences growing up were all pre 1989, so before the Children Act came in. So it
Right.
was, I had a lot of hang-ups of how we were treated in the kind of the court system and stuff as
Hmm.
children.
Hmm.
But yeah, but very stressful, stressful work. And
How was university with regard? So what would you be about 27, 28 when you went to
27,
uni?
yeah, I
27.
started at 27 and I graduated on my 30th birthday, actually. Yeah,
Right. And how
yeah.
was it with regards to, Freshers Week and, obviously because student life is a bit crazy, but I think with you being a bit older, you might have been a bit more focused on it or
Definitely very
yeah,
focused.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in them days, there were young, for the social work track, we were all very, well, we would be classed as very mature,
Hmm.
very mature
Hmm.
students. And it was, it wasn't a time where I don't, I don't recall the alcohol being a bit of an issue then.
Hmm.
I was very much focused on, you know,
This
doing the
next
study.
stage, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very much. And I'd set my stall on, coming out with a first class, degree,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and I made a lot of, I did sacrifice a lot because at that time, I had just got into raving with my husband. That well, we
Yeah.
weren't married then, but we just, and then I realized I discovered, drugs, and it
Yeah.
was like that opened up another avenue where I remember, having like a really first psychedelic experience, going, oh my god, I can't believe that there's these states of, I suppose, love and joy that I was
Yeah.
connecting with. And
Euphoria.
that's
Yeah.
the euphoria and feeling that, well, there must be something, not something wrong with me, but again, it was like another veil was, revealed. There is
Hmm.
something beyond, your current paradigm. There are these different states to feel.
Hmm.
And I suppose, you know, and for a time, I suppose I lost a little bit of control with the drugs, not massively,
Hmm.
but again, just not knowing when to say no, and to.
It's that addictive personality, and I like what you were saying there because I mean I did spend a lot of time going to NA, Narcotics Anonymous, but drugs were never a major addiction for me. I mean, I wouldn't even call them an addiction, but
No.
throughout my kind of late teens and 20s, I did spend a lot of time taking psychedelics and ecstasies and things like that. When I took ecstasy, I didn't drink. When I took acid, I never drank. There was a huge chunk of my time when I was going out and I wasn't drinking at all, because that would just kind of, it would numb out the feeling that you were getting. And like what you're saying, for me, it was, and I still stand by this. It was expanding my mind.
Mm.
I know a lot of people who go, "Oh, you're talking all hippie nonsense," but no, it did.
Mm.
And it kind of gave me
Yeah.
that there are other, as you say, paradigms to the universe that
Yeah.
we live in, as we
Yeah.
are. So, I've no regrets on any of that stuff, but I do know people that kind of completely lost the plot on things like that. Whereas I was using them as a tool to either dance or,
Yeah.
go and find nature with the psychedelics, but I didn't drink on those at all.
Mm.
I may have drank a little bit on the come down, but most of the time it was just smoking weed. It wasn't a really alcoholic kind of vibe that I was on in that point. So you would
Mm.
have been right at the beginning of the kind of acid house rave
Mm.
kind of
I,
culture. What,
I felt I was a
89,
bit
90?
late to the party.
That, I mean, I think it really started in the UK between about 87 to 89. I think that was the
Yeah.
first kind of wave of it. And
I
then,
think it was 93
right,
94 when
right.
I very first started to,
Yeah,
um, be entering, I suppose, that realm.
yeah,
But great times, really,
absolutely. Yeah.
great times. And like you, alcohol did not play a part once you were in a club. You didn't need it, did you? And
No.
it was about the connection with people. It was the dancing. It was the it was
It was the
you know
music, and it was the time at the right time. As I was
yeah.
saying in the podcast a while back, I went to a rave just outside Leeds about, I think it was about 2017, so it'd been about 37, 38, and it just didn't have the same vibe. There was a lot of angry people around looking for fights, and I know, and it was like, I was like, this is not what it used to be like. I don't like this. Like what you were saying back then, if you saw a drunk person at like a rave or a music dance club or whatever, a dance club, like a nightclub or whatever, sounding like an old man, discotheque, and
Disco.
but the drunk people would stand out like a sore
Yeah,
thumb. We had
yeah.
one friend and he didn't touch anything, so he just drank. And I remember seeing him staggering through the dance floor, and people were just like, kind of, what's he doing? And it was like,
Yeah.
yeah, as I say, there was just
Well,
no
they had a
alcohol for me
different
involved in
energy
that.
about them, didn't they?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
saw those people being gently removed from,
yeah,
spaces,
yeah.
taken outside, really, because they were bringing the vibe down in some respects.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
Alcohol. I was hearing the other day, and I should have looked this up, but oh, I'll need to put it in at the end. But so alcohol in, I believe it's Arabic, means poison of the body or something like that. But I will put that in the show notes. So it's like the word from, ancient, Arabic tongue is saying that this is bad for you, and I
yeah,
know, the podcast mostly about alcohol, and I'm not condoning drug use at all either, because I know
no,
that some
no,
people can
absolutely
get
not.
into sticky situations with that. But my experience was always, majority of it was good back then. But then it was just the alcohol, which is legal and it's
Yeah,
everywhere, was just when it started really kind of turning ship for me. Yeah. Yeah.
totally. Yeah, yeah, and grew out of that phase quite quickly.
Hmm.
It wasn't something it was of its time. At
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah.
but it interests me with the alcohol as well. Is that it almost feels though that we're all searchers,
Hmm.
um, whether it's in through the dance scene and the drug culture or through the alcohol. There is this coming together, this kind of ritualistic, changing levels of consciousness
Hmm.
that I think I haven't done a massive amount of study in that area, but I believe that as humans, we've always sought that. We've
Yeah.
always and I suppose I haven't got to that part of my story. But where I am now, it's almost like I've that's where I've got to,
Hmm.
is, through yoga and meditation and, um, but it's different levels of consciousness,
Oh
using
yeah, yeah,
different tools,
yeah.
um, but it's not that different really,
No.
when you think about it. Going to a yoga retreat and doing some ecstatic dance, but this time it's just not chemically induced or
Yeah.
alcohol induced, Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
It's like the clean kind of, non-substance way of doing it. There's breath work. There's so many
Mm,
different things. And I think, as you say, like humans, we are kind of always trying to search for whether it's a buzz or mind expansion or just getting out of our kind of mortal kind of consciousness. We want to get into the subconscious. So
yeah.
I think a lot of people are finding more kind of healthier options of doing that because, as
Mm,
I say, we're all just learning. So, science is and holistic science and spirituality is leading us down, new paths every day. So,
yeah, for
when
sure.
did it start kind of getting a bit darker for you and start to
Yeah.
realize that there was an issue?
Well, I mean, I would probably say for the best part of 20 years that I knew I had an issue, and I
Hmm.
tried very hard to keep control. I tried to moderate. I had various attempts to quit.
Hmm.
Um, but in that time, I had a pregnancy, I had my son. Um, I didn't drink. I did have the odd one, but
Hmm.
I didn't drink. I quit smoking, whilst I was pregnant. But I do remember breastfeeding and justifying the Mackie stouts, like the little
Yeah.
stout
That was
drink,
that was a thing that you could always tell when like a lady was pregnant because they would move from the gin and tonic onto the stout
Mackie
and stuff
stout,
like
yeah, yeah, because it
yeah,
had
yeah.
iron in it, of
It had iron
course.
in it. Of course, it's good for you. It's good for the baby. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
God.
This is how we're
Uh,
learning. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, so I think things came to a head when my perimenopause kind of a period, if you like.
Hmm.
So as I got into my early 40s, into my mid 40s, that's when things probably took a more darker. And I think there was a part because of I don't know. Sometimes I've read some things around being a heavy drinker can bring on your menopause a bit sooner, I believe.
Hmm.
But certainly it's not helpful. you
No,
know.
and I think I was listening to Louise Evans. She talks about it a bit in her podcast, just how, and I know it's different for everyone, for every female, but I think what they're starting to see is that the perimenopause can be easier if alcohol isn't involved.
Yeah, for sure.
It's definitely not making it as kind of,
Yeah,
foggy brain or whatever the kind of hormones that are going on is. It's just the alcohol is exasperating that, I believe.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it did, and I think I always had in my mind one of them rules. I don't know if you had different rules about your drinking. My rule was, that I would um, try not to drink before lunchtime on a weekend. But on a work day, I could I could go all day. I mean, it was unraveling from kind of 3 p.m. and
Hmm.
it was a race to 5 p.m. To open the first drink of the day. But my one of my rules was that I wouldn't go beyond one bottle of wine in an evening. Uh,
Right.
and then I kind of progressed into the second bottle.
Mm.
Um, and I
I'll just have one glass from the second
next
bottle, but once
bottle.
it's opened, that's
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
yeah,
But then
yeah.
I would always try to leave a little bit in the bottom of the second bottle. and yeah, it was kind of, yeah, it was all coming to a bit of a head, really. I was very isolated at that point. I was very overweight. I was pretty miserable. I
And
was just surviving.
you're still
You know,
with your husband,
yeah,
yeah. And
my husband,
so when
he
and
gave up.
what?
He gave up trying to help me, should we
Yeah.
say?
So he
He, and
wasn't a
he's
big drinker then at all, though.
no,
You were doing
gosh, no,
this
he's
on your
never been a
own.
big drinker. No,
Yeah,
he can
yeah,
have a one drink and put it back
yeah.
away.
I mean, I don't understand it, but I
I,
know there
I,
are people. My fiance is the same. So were you just open with your drinking, or were you
I
hiding
was
it?
hiding it. Oh, I was hiding it terrible, but not hiding it very well, really. I mean,
No, well,
just
because we're
yourself
drunk. I
at
mean,
it.
that's the thing. You can't hide it. You can't hide being like, even if you've had, like, I used to think that I was doing really well, and okay, she knew I was drinking. This was my ex, but she didn't know how much because, like, she'd be drinking some wine with me, but I'd have vodka in there. But she'd always be like, "How come you're more drunk than me, or whatever?" And but I think I was hiding it. But when you're
Yeah,
slurring and things like that, you're
yeah.
not hiding it at all.
No, definitely not. And then I'd do this thing where my memory became really, really bad.
Mm.
Um, and he would, unless he was gaslighting me, of course, but I don't think he was. It was he would be having a conversation the next day, and I've
Hmm.
just got no memory of it.
Well, it's
And he's
blackout,
going,
isn't it? It's
yeah, and
blackout.
he would get frustrated and go, "We've had this conversation, we've
Hmm.
discussed this," and I'd go, okay. And it was like shifting. I don't know, like the ground I was on just
Yeah.
didn't feel stable anymore. It felt like it was a very unsafe feeling,
Yeah.
really, to not, yeah, to not remember things like that. And
And I
you know,
think when someone says to you, "Oh, we had this conversation," and you would kind of go, "Oh, oh yeah, 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 yeah," and then you'd kind of make out that you did remember, and then
yeah,
try and
yeah,
remember, and yeah, it's
yeah,
horrible. I know exactly
awful.
what you mean.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, and that was affecting my, not just my relationship. That was affecting my work.
mhm.
I would come out of a meeting and just think, oh, I can't even remember what was said in the meeting. So I'd then build up all these strategies of having to write everything down, and some of this could have been the brain fog, come the perimenopause
Mhm.
stuff. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I went into menopause at 2019, so before we got into lockdown, when
Right,
things
right.
really kind of started to, you know, escalate even more, I suppose, as it did for many people. I think you either went one way or the other in the
Yeah,
lockdowns,
yeah.
didn't you? But I certainly wasn't one of those people that was doing Joe Wicks.
No, I didn't even know who Joe Wicks was in lockdown because I was until August of the year of lockdown and all that. I was still drinking heavily, heavily, heavily. So, there was no. I think the only thing I was watching was kind of when are we getting out of lockdown at that point, and when can I still go to the shop? Or I wasn't interested in pubs in those times
Yeah,
towards the end. It was just like, can I get to the shop and get me vodka?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So this is when you were kind of starting to see, right, I need to maybe do something about this at that point,
I'd
or
been on and off that for a lot of years.
yeah, yeah.
5 or 6 years. I'd even went to the GP, and tried that drug, not naltrexone,
A campsite,
the other one. It was
disulfiram.
the blocker. So you
Oh,
took it an hour before drinking, and then supposedly then that would take away the urge to drink. Or if you drank, there was there was a blocker on the
hmm.
the
I think a
GABA.
campsite does the same thing, but yeah, there's probably a
Yeah,
different named one as well. Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember the name now, but tried that. That took some doing to actually speak to the GP. So because what I haven't mentioned was, for me, the local services were out of the question, really,
Hmm.
because I managed one of the local drug
Uh,
and alcohol services. So that was so much shame, around that, to
hmm.
show up day after day, for quite a period of years.
Hmm.
Um, but I certainly never minimised anyone else's drinking,
Hmm.
during that time. I was very I was very aware of that. I was very aware of the level of my own drinking
Hmm.
in comparison to, certainly what the chief medical officer, used to recommend. I
Yeah.
used to even deliver the alcohol awareness training for the local safeguarding children's board. But again, I think one of my one of my I suppose key learning objectives was to help professionals actually reflect on their own level of drinking, because
Yeah.
for 80% of those people in that room, it was way over and above.
Yeah.
It was this normalization of heavy drinking. So
Hmm.
one of my key kind of learning outcomes was for people to have that light bulb moment for themselves,
Hmm. Hmm.
and say, well, that's okay, but you can't then minimize someone else's drinking. You're working with families where alcohol is having an impact on children and families. You can't, because that's what happened to me, with the GP. The
Hmm.
GP asked me, well, what are you drinking? And said, and they were like, well, that's, well, you're not drinking vodka at breakfast time, it's like
But you're still over above what the new
way
kind of
over,
binge drinking levels
way
are,
over.
which I think is like two large glasses, if that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
like, if you're got to the two bottles of wine a night, that's way
yeah.
over. So the doctor should have its due diligence of saying you need to do something about this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm sure not all GPs will respond in that way, But at
Yeah.
that time, that was my experience, and it's not just GPs, is it? Nurses, anyone who's not actually looked at their own
Yeah.
drinking,
Yeah. And I think that's the thing to say, and I'm not having to go to GPs or nurses or anything like that, but to have that conversation with someone who hasn't come in and said, listen, I think I'm an alcoholic. I think I've got an alcohol use disorder. Can you help me? Unless they've come in and said those specific words, the doctor doesn't want to venture into that, I think you should maybe cut down or give up or whatever, because they know that someone will go, oh, well, no, because it's so it's just unheard of to give up alcohol, isn't it? And I think a lot of things, maybe depression, anxiety, and all that, if they went to the doctor with these problems like I did, and the doctor had said to me, why don't you try and give up alcohol for a month to 3 months? I would have probably said, what are you talking about? But I would have probably gone, you're probably right. But instead they put me on citalopram. So, which
Right.
obviously didn't work because I was drinking. But I think it
Yeah.
would solve a lot of issues, just giving up for a month to 3 months and see where you're at. And then if you're feeling better, don't go back to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not as easy as that for
Not
everyone.
no,
So
and that fear of that fear of I knew I was at that point for a long time that I couldn't moderate. I knew I couldn't be a moderator. This needed to be a decision
yeah.
that for the rest of my life I won't be a drinker, or I know where I'm heading. That's already in the purse. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
already
yeah,
it's
yeah.
already coming. So and then that pain, that cognitive dissonance
Mhm.
for so long of there's a part of you that knows it wants something different, but there's a part of you that can't make that change.
Yeah.
And the fear around life, how could life have any color or meaning, without alcohol in it? What the hell, fear of missing out, that I mean, it's a joke. I mean, I never moved off my settee for the best part of 2 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, uh,
But it is,
but
it's so kind of all encompassing of like how can I live my life without alcohol? Like there's so many things in your head instantly. It's like birthdays, Christmas, parties or someone's wedding or
holidays,
yeah, or when I'm
sunsets,
feeling miserable,
sex.
holidays. Yeah, yeah, exactly. All of these things. It's
yeah,
and then you
yeah,
realize that, well, so where did it so lockdown was quite tough for you then, was it? Were you still
yeah.
drinking
It
through that?
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that increased, quite considerably
Like earlier and
at
earlier in the
that.
day.
Well, because I didn't need to drive to the office the next day. I could just peel out of bed, and do a crap job on, on the screen. It was, yeah. I mean,
And I
it was
think people with
terrible.
mugs that were sat on screen, it was getting earlier and earlier when that wasn't tea in there anymore. That was your gin and tonic, or, as long as you had a mug and you didn't get completely sozzled before 5 o'clock. But it was a beautiful summer. Everyone was enjoying it.
Uh,
And it was like, if you were one that was still working because you could work from home, you kind of felt a little bit hard done by because there was people that were furloughed or just not
yeah,
working, but they were
yeah.
just they were told to stay home and they were out in the garden having fun. So, well, I'm gonna have a drink at 2 o'clock, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, I didn't, but it increased the amount I think that I drank in the evening. There was always that. Oh, just think of the mornings that I drove the car the next day to get to
mhm.
work or to take my son to school, and just pray. Honestly, if I get in a shunt now or an accident, I knew I was way
You're not
over,
limit. Yeah.
way over. And again, I got away with it, you
Mhm.
know. Um, so yeah, so I think it was COVID actually that was my saving point, or I don't know, rock bottom, if you like. I mean, they talk about a rock bottom, don't they? But
Yeah. Yeah.
I got the COVID in February 22.
Hmm.
I'd been to London that weekend, and come back with that, and I'd
COVID.
not had it to that point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I was in, I think, just over 24 hours. I'd been in bed, and then thought, I think I might be withdrawing a bit here.
Oh, right. Right.
Yeah, I think this might be a bit of withdrawal. I felt absolutely shocking. I mean, felt very, very ill, and honestly, it sounds a bit odd, but it was like a divine moment. And
Hmm.
I don't believe in God in that way,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
I looked up to the sky, laid in my bed, and went, I'm done. This is it.
Yeah.
This is the point. This is the point where I quit. This is a gift. I
Yeah.
can't get out of bed. I was too ill to even drink, or eat, or do anything.
Hmm.
You're gonna do your rattle over the next 3 or 4 days,
Hmm.
um, and that's what I did. And but almost into day two and day three, it
Hmm.
felt different in my body. It was like this shift inside of me
Hmm.
that I knew. I said to my husband, "This is it." I was
So you
ecstatic.
you were kind of making yourself accountable by telling him that this is it,
Yeah,
I'm done with
this
it.
is it.
Yeah.
This is it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, he was encouraging, but obviously in a
You'd heard it before.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
had it before. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. But every morning I woke up, it was like just the joy of not waking up with a hangover,
Yeah.
not waking up with that shame and that regret and that same old story in your head of today I'm gonna not drink today. And you'd spend an hour laid in bed thinking of all what's coming ahead for the day. And then I'd think about how I was going to change the day to avoid that first drink of the day.
Hmm.
And then of course, you don't, do you? You get to 3 o'clock and you're already thinking, where's the next drink? So to wake up without that, it was like this massive freedom,
Hmm.
this expansion, and there were times where I felt a bit shaky and a bit, you know, unconfident, if you like.
Hmm.
It needed a bit of planning. I had to change up, my routine. I
Hmm.
threw that out of the window, and that's where my husband was very supportive, because I'd say it's such a high risk situation to go into the kitchen to cook an evening meal, because that's where
Yeah.
that's where it all would start most days.
Hmm.
Then I'd come in and go upstairs, and he would cook the tea, for the first couple of weeks or so,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I just avoiding anything that was going to trigger me in some way. And then realised that alcohol-free beers make a great alternative. So when I did get those, oh God, I could do with a drink right now, was like, well, of course you can have a drink. There's a lovely non-alcoholic, lager in the fridge that you can drink and enjoy while you cook the meal. Or and I did rely on that for probably the first good year.
And they are a great tool for certain people, that's they're so commendable that there's so much more range now, because 7 years ago I don't think there was as many as there is now. There definitely was no set or
was it Bex Blue was the only thing that you could use?
Bex Blue was the only one.
Disgusting.
Oh, it's horrible. I bought it one time to a party, and I think I brought about 12 of them, and someone was like, who's brought the Bex Blue? And I thought, well, what's wrong with it? And they went, it's alcohol free. And I went, oh, that's why it was so cheap. And it was like, I had to go back to the shop because I wasn't sober at that point, and I just made a doozy. So yeah.
So lots of gratitude, lots of and I think the classic is, when you do remove alcohol, you do need to replace it with something. And I had just 2 weeks before, my quit date, I had been invited to join this menopause group, which was 2 nights a week. We were doing a bit of strength training, a bit of HIIT training. So I had that. And that was getting me out of the house. I was going to meet these other women. I mean, it was scary AF, to begin with. But I was...
Because you'd have done all that kind of meeting new people and socialising with your crutch,
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. But what I did find was a group of women who were also really suffering with their menopause.
Right.
And that opened up a whole, other avenue of support that I didn't know I needed until I, received it, which was fantastic. And then, just... I suppose what I know now is that I then approached my sobriety like I did alcohol, which was like, I over-exercised, I over-fixated on losing weight, I just overdid everything. I then started overdoing shopping. It was just like a compulsion, a constant. And it was funny. I was coming back from probably collecting my 15th vintage parcel from the local garage. And then going, have you got a problem, Laura, with shopping? It's like, and I think that was...
But it's the dopamine hit, isn't it? Because you're lacking that from the alcohol, and now it's like, where can I get this dopamine hit? And it's like buying stuff on Amazon or Vinted, was it? Then
Vinted, Vinted. God, I spent a fortune.
Yeah, I mean, Depop was mine, and it's like, but you think, but and you get the parcel, and it's like the anticipation. You're watching the tracking, and then it comes, and you open it, and you're like, and then you're like, right, put that over there. Do you know what I mean? It's not changing your life, is it? It's really not.
No, not at all. No. But that was at the point, I think, where I realised that, well, I've missed out a little bit on the journey with the menopause group. One evening, they'd said, oh, we're bringing a lady in to do some yoga with you all, ladies. And most of the women went, yoga. And I was like, oh, I've never done yoga before. Anyway, did the session on that evening, and honestly, I broke. There was just these tears from nowhere, this emotional release that happened on the mat, which I now understand. I didn't know what was happening at the time, and I couldn't sleep that night. It was like something that again switched on. And that's then began my healing journey, which began with yoga, and then that led into a meditation practice, which has since gone into somatic therapy, and it's an ongoing journey, but it's it's that, I suppose in yoga we'd call it the samskaras, the ingrained mental and emotional, layers is kind of going through this process of, dissolving some of those samskaras and doing that healing work. And part of that, the beauty of that is, has opened up this whole new world. And I suppose it's not, in some respects, it opened up to, I suppose, my second awakening, which happened not this December, the December.
I was going to say, what is your sober date?
So I'm 3 years and 3 years and 3 months, is it?
Yeah. What was the date? Sorry.
Oh, the date, the 28th of February, 22.
Cool. Well done, you. Yeah. 2022. So 28th of February, is that not on the leap year?
No,
sorry, it's the 29th of February.
29th,
yeah.
But I do remember looking back at the calendar once and going, oh, if I'd only had gone a few days earlier, I would have had 22 to 22.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, anyway.
So, yeah, go on, sorry. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that, I can't remember what I was going to say. That it's interesting because some of the things that I have, experienced and talked about, I think people would maybe say that they've had similar through the AA to a degree, but it's, I've not given myself up to a higher power. I think I've had an embodied, and I'm not saying I'm liberated, not at all, but I've had I suppose the initial awakenings to, I suppose, and knowing myself in an awakening to more of my truer essence, if you like. And I've, since become, I suppose, quite a practitioner of yoga. I didn't know any of this about yoga when I started. I just thought it was, something that you did to bend and get fit. I didn't realize it was a whole kind of spiritual.
awakening. I mean, I've never practiced yoga. It's something that I do want to kind of get into at some point. I did meditation very much so back at the beginning of my journey. And again, it's something that I need to kind of maybe, do a lot more of. I didn't do AA. I did a few meetings, but then I did NA, which was just my group, my tribe. And it was great for me for the first year. I'm not religious, so when it said, give yourself up to a higher power, for me, it was like, well, I'm going to choose the universe, everything around me. But I was listening to a podcast today, The Sober Stretch, and the guy that was on with Gary Hammurabi, he was saying, forget about the higher power and all that. He said, when somebody's getting sober and doing that, their higher power is from within, which I think is more to do with the yoga and the meditation. Whatever people say, it's my God, it's your Christian God or wherever. It's you that's getting yourself sober. So forget about the higher power. Whatever you're giving yourself up to is you're giving it up to your internal being. That's the person, that's the thing that's getting you sober. So, and I listened to that and it really resonated with me. So it's kind of similar to what you're saying with the yoga and the holistic kind of practices.
And I suppose it's an embodied, it's a lived embodied experience that I've had, which people need to have a direct experience. I think it's not something necessarily that it's not a cognitive only for me. I think the difference is with yoga is this mind-body connection, being able to kind of connect with yourself in as I say, in this embodied way. And I think what I've experienced is this. You said the universe. I suppose we talk about it as kind of consciousness,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but this kind of melting way. So in these states of meditation, it's not about transcending like we've probably done with drugs or alcohol, is we want to transcend out of our human experience to something higher.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually quite the opposite. It's dropping down within, into the void, the ground of being, and it's this kind of feeling of yourself melting away, should we say, softening of the edges, and that feeling that actually we are part of consciousness. There's no separation. You and everything that I can see, we're all in that kind of sea of consciousness together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we have such this sense of separation. Normally, some people call it the dream state, because we've not woken up from the dream state, but this sense of a very separateness. And I think, it's not, I think it makes sense to me that alcohol, was something that I was chasing to find that connection. But actually what it was doing was just further disconnecting me from myself. And for anyone else that uses alcohol, I think there is that seeking within us that potentially, there are other ways to get there, I suppose. But
it is, and it's interesting that, I think sometimes, and I like to call it like a superpower, like being sober and being on this side of the fence now. And it's almost like I want to scream at all the people that are still drinking, going, you need to come over this side of the fence, because it is like a spiritual awakening. It is like, a kind of rebirth almost, because, my eyes are wide open now, because I can see how life is supposed to be. Yeah, I spent times expanding my mind and doing this and doing that, but alcohol essentially is the worst out of the lot of them. It's the thing that numbs you to everything, and then causes you all this pain as well. So it's not just, it's like a two-stroke thing. We think it's kind of numbing everything out, if we're having a bad day or whatever, but it's also the thing that's destroying us from inside as well, and destroying that spiritual kind of
dampening your light, your inner light, your inner
light.
flame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And I think, what I've come to believe through my journey is that it's actually not to shame yourself around alcohol, because now, that what I've described, the way I did alcohol was the way I did everything. There was a reason for that, that based upon my childhood, I had an anxious attachment. I over people pleased, I wanted to fit in, and I've got awful perfectionism, and I pushed myself in so many ways to work harder than anyone else to prove this worth. And what that then gives you is these cycles of kind of burnout, really. But I believe that alcohol prevented so many of those burnouts. Alcohol kept me going for all of those years, because it was my quick switch. It was the way I was trying to deal with the stress response in my body. People talk about the nervous system now. I was in fight or flight for years, chronically in fight or flight, and then periods of freeze where I would disconnect, and disassociate. But alcohol, actually, when you look at yourself through the lens of the nervous system, I immediately had more compassion for myself, because it makes sense. When we're not stupid humans, we do the best with what we can at the time, and alcohol in some respect enabled me to keep going at the level that I needed to keep moving forward. That flight response in me, it was always that compulsion that to go further, can't sit still.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't feel, goodness God, can't, don't want to go there, so let's
Mhm.
keep
Let's
working
keep numbing
hard.
ourselves and just keep powering through with
Yeah,
kind of almost like blinkers on. Don't
totally.
deal with the kind of external noise
Yeah,
because alcohol's going to keep us powering through. I no, I absolutely get that.
yeah.
And then you stop and it's like you kind of put
Oh,
the brakes on, yeah, and you're like, whoa, whoa, there's actually colors and things. Everything else is a bit more
yeah,
vibrant around.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of, I suppose, what I'm still working on. I don't think you ever get to there's no end point.
No,
But
and
for the somatic work that I've done, it's it's been a lifesaver, if you like.
yeah.
I don't think I would ever not. I don't think I'd ever relapse. Never say never. I
Hmm.
got, but I think I couldn't carry on the way I was going. I
No.
couldn't
Do you
carry on.
think do you think if you were to have a drink tonight, you'd go back to where
That's
you were?
interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
I've occasionally have the thought, but I go, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not
yeah.
even going to entertain that because I can't be sure. And actually, I know alcohol's not the the evil thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was my relationship to it, my nervous system, my functioning.
Hmm.
um, but my life is just so you don't need alcohol.
Yeah.
So why would I even want to try and have
Yeah.
another drink again?
Yeah.
Because my inner state now, my resting inner state is a joyful state.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong, there is a lot of pain, there's a lot of, but what I'm learning to do is love life in all of its, colors, if you like.
Yeah, because it goes up and down
It
and
does.
but it's not the kind of it's peaks and troughs and not mountains and
Yeah,
valleys, isn't it? And
yeah.
I think with me, I've thought the same thing, not so much now because I'm like you, I'm like, why would I want to entertain the thought of having alcohol? I don't need it. It's not that I don't
Mm.
want it, it's that I don't need it
You
and I
do.
don't want it. But I think back when I was like maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years, and I thought, oh, you know what? When I was drinking, I was really, really depressed. And it's that catch 22, like chicken or egg. What was, obviously alcohol was causing the depression. I was drinking because I was depressed. So now my life is better and I'm happy and content. Would I need the crutch of the alcohol to make me feel better? I don't know. And to be honest, I don't care because I don't want it and I don't need it. So like, but I think because there's then that chemical like reaction, and if I was to go and have a drink tonight, I think about 99% chance I'd be right back to a bottle of
Yeah,
vodka by
yeah,
Thursday, so
yeah,
I don't want to do that again
yeah,
because my life
yeah,
would just be in tatters, and I don't,
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
I
want
mean,
to.
it's quite interesting. I started to do. I don't know if have you heard of microdosing? With
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, psilocybin.
yeah.
So I've got this unhealthy relationship with rest.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I struggle to rest. I struggle to turn the off switch off.
Yeah, yeah,
That
absolutely.
is, and that nervous system dysregulation is something that I'm still really very much working with.
Hmm.
Working on, and I was really interested in the different ways people have been using microdosing.
Hmm.
And one of them is around, nervous system regulation.
Hmm.
So I have been microdosing for 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
Right, okay.
But obviously one of my biggest concerns was how do I allow myself, how am I going to react to taking sub there's what's the word, you're not supposed to feel any psychedelic effect.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, you're not getting
I
high
would
as
say
such.
subliminal, not subliminal. That's
Subconscious.
no, there's another word, but
Uh,
anyway,
Yeah.
Anyway, um, and there's that I suppose that compulsion within me to go, well, take more than you're supposed to take,
Yeah.
and I was aware of that. It was arising in me. I would take out while I was calibrating. It was like I'd feel a very subtle response to the psilocybin, and think, oh, there's a part of me that goes, well, just go take more because you want more of the effect, more of the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like the microdosing is the mushroom has helped me temper that compulsion,
All right,
because
I
I
see.
haven't gone with it, and
Yeah.
I've stayed, and I've written. It's been liberating, actually,
Mm.
to trust myself to do it without kicking the ass out of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because you're you're
Yeah,
you're you're essentially moderating it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you're in control of it. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and
Yeah.
I've been starting to do a little bit of reading around it, and there are other people that have found it helpful,
Mm-hmm.
around addiction. I don't think it was something I would have done at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but
Now you've got quite an even kind of level playing field on
yeah,
it. You know what you're doing,
yeah,
and do you know what? I mean, as I said before, the drugs were never an issue, and I think it's very much being used for, like medical purposes, a lot of mushrooms and all these different psychedelics and things like that. As you say, they're not there to get people completely high as a kite, but they
no,
are being
not at
used
all.
for lots of different ailments and mental health issues, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. Alcohol, on the other hand, is not being used for any purpose whatsoever, apart from maybe cleaning oil off of something. That's about all
Engine
it's good for.
cleaning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
engine cleaning. Yeah, rubbing
yeah.
alcohol.
That's a good,
Um,
a good point. But yes, there is a lot of kind of movement in the
yeah,
psychedelic therapy realm, which I'm quite interested in. I'm now a somatic therapist, so
yeah, yeah.
very new to this modality,
Uh-huh.
um, but yeah, so yeah, I think it's been interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the mushrooms have helped me to maybe remove that question, can I just have one drink?
Hmm.
I don't need to have the one drink of alcohol, but I think there is a part of that compulsion, because I don't believe there is something like an addictive personality. I think
Hmm.
that's largely disproved, isn't it?
Hmm.
But
It's
but
like
I
we're seeking for something though. Something's missing, so we do this addictive personality
think,
thing to fill some void that is missing in our life. And sometimes all it is finding a hobby or just going for a walk. But instead we go on Amazon and go down the pub. But it's some void that's missing that just needs to be filled. So yeah.
or it is that I mean, we're just not taught how to be with our feelings, are we?
No.
You know,
No.
and when you do remove alcohol, there is an opportunity there to do some quite intentional kind of
Yeah.
healing work.
Yeah.
Whether you want to, it's optional,
Yeah.
it's for sure, but I do think a lot of what I see with the everything is a distraction away from actually being with reality, and to be with reality means to be fully alive, to feel what is there and what
Yeah,
is
fully
arising,
present.
fully
Yeah.
present, and fully
Yeah.
arise, being okay with that.
Yeah.
um
But
and
we're taught, like, not taught, but behaviors we learn from an early age, especially people that grew up in the 80s and 90s and 70s. It's when you're going out to have a good time, you're going to the pub, you're socializing, you're having a drink, you're doing this, you're doing that. So all of us have just learned behaviors of how to deal with everything with alcohol, and whether it be on a low level or a high level, it's still always there, and it's the it is a massive minority of people that really don't drink. Obviously, there's a lot more sober people, sober curious people now, But
Yeah.
if you went out and you were at university, if there was someone that didn't drink, they were very much in the minority, and
Mm,
that's society on a whole. And it's
mm.
crazy that that's how we deal with reality. Rather than being present, we'd rather be off somewhere else in our minds, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And anxiety levels are increasing,
Yeah,
aren't they? I mean,
yeah.
although I do want to say that younger people, I've observed some younger generations, and I'm talking like your 17 to 25 year olds
Hmm.
now, um, don't drink like we drank.
No, no.
I mean, there are still, but on the whole, I think, yeah, it seems like the pendulum has swung a little bit back in the other direction.
They're
Uh,
just a bit more savvy, and I think because they have the internet on their in the palm of their hand, they can research whatever they want. So when they start seeing that, I mean, if I don't know what I'd be like, but if someone, if tables were reversed and it was back, if we could get the internet in the palm of our hands back when we were like 14, and
mm,
it flashed up on our phones saying alcohol causes 7 types of cancer, would we have gone and drank? I mean, I know we knew that smoking caused cancer, but you know what? I think we'd kind of be changing our minds, and I think that's why the kids are kind of steering away from it. And also, they seem to be more in control of their lives than a lot of us were in the kind of 80s and 90s. We just like to party and let our hair down and forget about everything. But yeah, they're all being
I,
recorded now.
yeah, I do. I do joke with a couple of my friends that our kids aren't the drinkers because they've seen us.
Yeah,
They've actually made a conscious choice because you do, don't you? You go, I'm not going to be like my parents.
yeah.
I'm just not going to be a heavy drinker like my bloody mother.
Yeah.
you
And that's
know.
the thing, is because they're like, well, we've seen you in States, and
Yes.
I mean, my parents weren't big drinkers at all. My dad liked to drink, but he wasn't kind of, I had a stepfather as well, and my mum and my stepfather weren't big drinkers at all. They'd maybe have the odd glass of wine here and there, but that would be it. I wouldn't ever see them drunk. I think we saw my mum drunk a few Christmases when she was dancing the tables, and that was just a bit of a laugh because by then I was drinking, and it was the thing to do. But I didn't come from a family where it was heavy drinking or anything like that. So I guess we don't see it as an issue, and then it just kind of, yeah, it's a weird one because there are learned behaviors, and then it's behaviors that you've not learned as well. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting one. Do you
Mm.
think that alcohol still has a place in our society, Laura?
Um. Oh, I'd I'd like to think it didn't.
Hmm.
I like to think maybe it's just the circles that I move in now. Um, it just feel like there is this groundswell of a sober movement,
Hmm.
and a couple of times I've said it's like the new veganism. you know,
Yeah,
it's uh,
yeah, yeah,
it's becoming, and it happened with fags, didn't it? I mean,
yeah,
it became socially unacceptable to smoke.
yeah.
And I hated it. I hated being, banished outside into the wind and the rain, to
Mhm.
have a fag. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. For those people that can only have one or two drinks, I don't know. Why would I deny that to those people? Yes.
I
But
know. And that's not what, I'm not saying we need to ban it and outlaw it. I just think it's kind of losing its foothold on. I,
yeah.
I think it will eventually kind of go like smoking because the
Mm.
the the science and the health implications are definitely coming through a lot more prevalent now, and with the kind of sober community on Instagram, and elsewhere, but it is kind of spilling over, and you're seeing a lot more celebrities who maybe weren't as outspoken about it are definitely coming out of the woodwork and saying how
Yeah.
how long they've been sober and things like that. And when celebrities start doing it, that's when it becomes cool to do it,
I
I
know,
mean,
but
it
yeah,
does take away from it a little bit, but it's,
yeah.
but
And I,
then
and
you
I,
see, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I don't know about you, but there was a part in my early sobriety where I could have been quite evangelical about it, but I
Mm.
decided not to be, because that felt, it didn't feel, I just feel like you just need to concentrate on what you're doing over
Wow.
here, you know, and the changes that you make for yourself, and then being able to be out there in the world, showing that you can socialize without a drink, you can go on holidays, you can do all of these great things.
Yeah.
Um, there's no, you don't need to say anything other than that.
Yeah.
People can see the difference. People can see the change within, us in the sober movement, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, it can hold up a mirror to some people, can't it, who
Hmm.
are struggling with their drinking. It makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you know but we can't apologize for that, can we?
No, and
So,
that's, if anything, if it can help them and hold that mirror up and they start kind of questioning what their kind of habits are like, then that's only, a good thing,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
exactly the same, for the first, well, I mean, I'm 4.5 years now. For the first couple of years, it was more just about like shouting about it and shouting about being sober. I don't think I was trying to, if people contacted me and said, "Oh, what did you do?" and all that, then I would tell them what worked for me. I wouldn't be saying that you need to do this and all that. And I still
mm,
wouldn't be doing that because I've only just qualified as a peer mentor, but I still think that
mm,
you can only say what worked for you
for
or
you,
what's
yeah,
suggested. You're never going to say this is what can get you sober because it's different for everyone. But I
yeah,
think I've kind of turned a corner here, and why I've started the podcast, because I want to get stories out just to
mm,
kind of step up what I can do myself to give back to help people, because
yeah,
people helped me, and that I wouldn't have been sober. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for people that had kind of helped me. So that's
yeah,
kind of why I want to do the podcast and help people. So it's not really kind of going saying this is what you need to do to get sober, because it is different for everyone. I went to NA, you did yoga and kind of meditation and things. So
mm.
so where can people find you, Laura?
I'm on Instagram.
Hmm.
I am Laura Starky, and you'll find from there links to my link bio. And
Hmm.
I've got the Somatic Wellness Hub, which is where I my offerings are, if you
Yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah,
And I am offering a somatic coaching. I'm offering coaching for alcohol freedom through the
yeah,
somatic lens. And
yeah.
I also, for those that are in sobriety, if you like, or for anyone else, but not in active addiction,
Hmm.
there is somatic therapy. But yeah, people, you can't really access somatic therapy while you're in active addiction,
Sure,
which
sure.
is why I offer that kind of coaching
Yeah.
element as a step before that. And yeah, so Somatic Wellness Hub. Um,
And is that in person or on Zoom or a bit of
and I'm
both?
I'm I'm largely offering online,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
because there's a part of me. I'm 55 this year, and I feel
Ah,
like,
I mean, you don't, you know what?
oh,
You look
bless you,
about the same
Jimmy.
age as me until you said that you were born in 70, and I thought, wow, okay, so.
Thank you. Flattery will get you everywhere.
Well, this is true.
Yeah, yeah, I just feel, I don't know, this whole thing. I want to become a digital nomad.
Right?
Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I feel that I've not had the opportunity to travel. And if I create this online offering, if you like, then I've got something that it's a passion.
Hmm.
And I feel like that is my giving back. That's me, me serving,
Hmm.
you know, but on the other hand, giving me something that I want to do, work that I don't need to retire from.
Yeah,
I, I want to do something that, yeah, is going to take me to the end of my time, whenever that may be. And
And it's helping people as well.
yeah,
That's also,
yeah,
like for me, I'm a gardener and I'm 45. I'm not, I don't want to be doing gardening in the middle of, I love gardening, but I don't want to be doing it in the middle of winter when I'm like, pushing 65 and things like
mm,
that. Whereas like you, if I can help people, in person or on Zoom, doing my peer mentoring,
yeah,
recovery, support as well, then that's, it's a fantastic thing to do. Yeah, right
yeah,
up to the
yeah.
end. Yeah.
That's my plan.
I
We'll
love
see.
it. It's a
We'll
great
see.
plan. And what advice would you give to anyone that was kind of, maybe early recovery, sober curious,
Mm.
apart from obviously come to your website and use your kind of
Yeah.
support that way. Yeah.
I, for me, I think if I think back, it was the shame that held me back for so long.
Hmm.
So and that being in silence, that feeling that there were so many barriers to speaking to somebody, to finding the help that I needed. I mean, in the end, I did. I'm saying that I did reach out and connected with Cerberistas when they very first started off online.
Hmm.
That was a long, long time ago. Um, but on the whole, I mean, I did do it myself,
Yeah.
but there is a lot of period before that where I got a lot of information and I got a lot of the pieces of the
Yeah.
jigsaw,
And doing what you
before,
do for a job as
yeah.
well.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, what my advice would be is, um, there's always hope, and don't give up, because I know this sounds cheesy, but I honestly thought I was a no hope. I
Hmm.
honestly felt there was a number of years where I felt that this was going to be too much, too surmountable, not possible, and God, I'm so glad, that I didn't listen to that,
Yeah.
the voice of the inner critic there, and that I allowed that intuition, because it is the voice of the intuition that's pushing forward. It just got drowned out so many times, and I would just say, keep going, keep trying. Every relapse is another step closer.
It's part of the process, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
yeah. And and it is a journey, and you don't need to do it alone.
Hmm.
It is better in company. And I would say find a community, because that's what I know. It wasn't a sober community per se, but it was a community of women that I tapped into around the menopause, and I do believe that was a massive help at that point,
Yeah.
for me. So, it's find your tribe, or find your community, and that
Hmm.
support for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And Laura, lastly, do you regret getting sober?
No regrets.
No
The
regret.
only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. And how many times do you hear that? But you
Yeah.
but you can't, it's no good, that you did, it's not helpful to go there.
Yeah.
I do believe we are where we are exactly where we need to be,
Hmm.
and the whole of the journey that has got to this point all makes perfect sense when you stand here looking back. I know that when you're in the midst of the shit,
Hmm.
it doesn't feel like that at times, but there is a point where you can get that, I suppose, that more bird's eye view, and look back and see the struggle, and take the gifts from the struggle,
Yeah.
because there
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there is the gold within all of the shit.
Yeah. Every time there is a relapse, or it just makes you that little bit stronger. So, if people are kind of, because I was the same, I just thought, this is my lot. I'm just gonna be, I was calling myself an alcoholic. I was like, this is just who I am now. I'm not,
Yeah,
it's too hard to get out
identity.
of this. Yeah, it's too hard to get out of this. And I'm like looking back and I'm like, it wasn't an easy life. So to say it's too hard to get out of this, my life was hell. It was like the lies that I had to kind of
Mm.
keep in order in my head, and and just
Mm.
where I was going and what I was doing, and just yeah, it's painful and messy. So
And when that quit switch gets flicked, what
yeah,
a what a freedom, you know. I mean, it's just when you know, when you're not white knuckling it, when you've got your mindset in place, when
yeah,
you've got your, you do need a bit of planning, don't you? You do need to make some effort
yeah,
at
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
beginning.
You got to do the work. Yeah,
You've got to do a bit of the work, but if the mindset is right, then yeah, that freedom, that honestly, it was like my anxiety went from 100 to, I don't know, 12
yeah.
within
It's a
within
euphoria, isn't it?
it.
Because you're like,
Unbelievable.
life is so much better, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's just. But again, you say, it's that I want to shake people and go, come on over to this side, because
Yeah.
it's the water's sweet, and it's just a much better way of living. So
But you're doing that, you're putting this,
yeah,
the podcast, you're putting it out there,
thank you.
Jimmy, and um
I appreciate
and
that.
I do think, yeah, the more people hear the stories,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
um
because I think
just one person,
that's all. That's all. If we can help one person, because when I used to go to the meetings and I loved it, and I loved telling my story and listening to the stories, and I'd always have something new to say every week, and I'd be thinking about it and come to me, and I'd go and share, and there'd always be the same stories, but there'd be new ones and this, and I loved them, and I love people when there was someone else coming in and seeing how someone would kind of not change their story, but maybe tell it in a different way. And I love that. And that's something that is kept within those rooms, and you can't take that out. Obviously, you can't bottle it or record it.
yeah,
So doing this, it's like this is kind of how people can then hear the stories that I used to hear in the meetings, and that was what helped me, that got me sober and kept me sober. So yeah.
yeah. No, that is amazing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
never quite made it into a.
No, and a lot of people didn't, and I did smart, and I did AA, and then I
Yeah,
was I was finding them on Zoom and all that. I became a meeting tart at the point, but it was what I needed for the first year, whereas
yeah,
you were doing your yoga and
yeah,
meditation, which
yeah.
is what I want to start doing now. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm moving in with my fiance next week, in fact, so the beams and all this, I'll be moving out of here.
Ah,
It's but I I put some stuff down in the studio, as we're calling it, where I'm going to do the podcast, and she picked up the roll mat and she said, "Are we going to put this in the cupboard?" And I said, "No, no, no." I said, "I'm going to leave that out, because that's going to then make me accountable to start doing yoga up here in the studio." So
fantastic.
we will see where that goes, but
Yeah,
hopefully,
well, keep me posted,
I
Jimmy.
will
Keep me
do. I will
posted.
do. Yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
chasing you up. Is there anything else you want to add to the listeners?
No. Just thank you for having me and listening, and
It's been great. Yeah,
it's been a lovely conversation, and
yeah, yeah.
great to connect with you. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
I'll put all your details in the description of the podcast episode, and hopefully people will be contacting you and sharing their stories as well. So yeah,
yeah,
thank you very
super.
much, Laura, and enjoy
Lovely,
the rest of your
Jimmy.
evening.
Yeah, be well.
You too. Cheers. Peace. So yeah, thank you, Laura. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. She really kind of made herself accountable by telling her husband, and subsequently her son, that she was kind of struggling, and she was going to stop drinking. Like a lot of us, COVID and the kind of restrictions that were put on us really did kind of ramp people's addiction up, but it also brought out a lot of people that were recognizing quite how bad they were at that point. So I kind of was really struggling at the beginning of it, and then got sober in the August. So I had my own kind of troubles with that as well, but it was a kind of two-edged sword with COVID. I think that a lot of people still are dealing with the issues from that time, but obviously, like Laura, used that as a kind of tool to get her out of it. So yeah, thanks again, Laura. I hope a lot of people have taken a lot from that conversation as much as I did. Again, it's just listen for the similarities and not the differences. There's a few things in the episode that I'm going to put in the show notes, but there's a really good article that I will put in there as well. So the word alcohol comes from the Arabic al-kul. Don't know if the pronunciation's right with that. Which means body-eating spirit, and gives root origins to the English term for ghoul. In Middle Eastern folklore, a ghoul is an evil demon thought to eat human bodies, either as stolen corpses or as children. The words alembic and alcohol, both metaphors for aqua vita or vitae, or life water, and spirit, often refer to a distilled liquid that came from magical explorations in Middle Eastern alchemy. So yeah, I'd heard that on Louisa Evans' podcast that she did, and it just really struck me that, you know, we look back into history and we find, I suppose, little clues, you know, little clues that obviously you know, alcohol is forbidden in you know, in Muslim country, Muslim religion, and it's just really interesting that they've obviously called it a body-eating spirit. So, you know, kind of ahead of their time. I know that we, as a culture, have always kind of used it, and you know, maybe it's time to kind of change our minds and start looking towards, you know, I guess demonizing it and showing it for what it really is, for the buzz that you might get for, you know, the first hour or whatever, even if you get that, the kind of fallout from it is much worse. So rambling a little bit now. If you have enjoyed the podcast, I mean, we're up to, I think this is like episode 23, 24 now. I was going to take a break at 25, but I'm just going to keep pushing on through, and yeah, I'm just enjoying doing it. I'm getting some great guests on, so yeah, I will have a break at some point, I think, but for now, I'm just enjoying doing it, and I know that a lot of people are getting a lot from it. So if you are enjoying it, leave a 5-star review, hit the comment button, and leave me a little note on what you're thinking of it. As I said before, I can take the brutal you know, comments as well. And share it, let other people know about the podcast. So yeah, so stay safe, stay sober, stay supportive. Cheers guys, see you next week.